Nice. So we are now open and attendees are starting to come in. So welcome those who are joining as you come in. Oh, seeing some familiar faces entering. I'm beginning to feel very much like Fringe today. So as people are entering, I just want to introduce, I guess I'm kind of like your MC for the day / Zoom housekeeping expert as of the last couple of weeks. So hi, my name's Alan. I'm the registration manager here at the Fringe Society. If this is your first time joining us at one of our events, welcome. This is part of our Fringe Exchange program, which is something that Amy and her team have put together to replace the physical festival, to give us just that feeling of Fringe and get those conversations going that need to keep going, pandemic or no pandemic. So welcome, this is a webinar if you've not done one of those on Zoom yet. So just explain your camera and your is off and your microphone will be muted from the start. So don't worry, there's no technical difficulties if you can't see yourself. Hopefully you just see lots of happy faces in panels. I was trying to count them up, 10, there's 10 panels there. Richard, who will be introducing, will be chairing this event, and we'd love to hear from you though. So if you look at the bottom, there is a Q&A function, which you can click on and ask any questions that you may have at the time, and then we can address them to the panel. There's also the usual Zoom chat function. It would just be really great to see that if there's you chatting amongst yourselves about things, but also it can sometimes be quite hard when you're just talking into space. So it's nice to know you're there. So please feel free to say hello. I especially like it when people have been saying where in the world they're coming from, because we've already had people today from India, New York, Australia. It's kind of nice to see that internationalism is truly alive and well, albeit from our living rooms. So yeah, I think that's everything I've got to say about housekeeping while people are coming in. So I'm going to just cut across to my lovely colleague, Amy, who can give you a bit more of an introduction to the event itself.
Hi everybody, good afternoon from wherever you are joining us. As Alan said, this is one of the first of our series of the Fringe Exchange program, which is a series of industry events that are set up to try and encourage industry to still be having those conversations that we would be having in Edinburgh in August, but unfortunately this year we can't be having. I'm just going to sort of say a quick thank you now to everybody for joining us on the panel. We've got a very esteemed panel of international programmers and experts who have worked with us actually over the last couple of years around a program that we ran last year called Fringe Forward, and they're involved in the marketplace this year, which is a new online showcase platform for kind of the tour-ready work that was programmed for the Fringe this year that the venues have put forward. So welcome to all of you, and I would also just like to say a big thank you to Richard Jordan, who many of you will know, who is a very world-renowned producer and award-winning, numerous awards, and works very internationally and has certainly worked with the Fringe for a number of years. So we're very grateful for him coming on today and for chairing this event for us. So enjoy and thank you again. And as Alan said, please, for those that have joined the event, feel free to ask questions, make comments. We're here for an hour, so the time is yours, but I'll hand over to Richard in the meantime.
Thanks, Amy and Alan. Well, hello everyone. I hope you're all safe and well wherever you are. I was interested, the information about this talk suggested grabbing a cup of tea, but if you do feel the need for something stronger, I can honestly say you will not be judged. And obviously, because of the timelines, you may well be heading towards a nightcap, so that's all good as well. It really is a global panel that we've got, and I hope in an hour that we can give maybe a greater overview and perspective, perhaps a little of what's going on around the world with some shared experience and knowledge. So I'd like to start, if I may, with asking the panel if they could introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their organizations and the work that they do in the regions where they are. In the quest for fairness, I think we'll start alphabetically. So Anthony, if you want to kick the ball ready.
Damn, as soon as you said alphabetical, I knew that was me. Hi, I'm Anthony. I'm the head of program at Fuel. We're based in London. We're a independent producing company. And although we're based in London, about 80% of the work that we tour is actually outside of London and internationally. We work with a range of artists, going from really early in their career artists right through to very established artists who are putting on shows at the National Theatre or doing tours across the world internationally. So I guess in terms of experience, my experience and where I sit really is more with helping artists to advance their own knowledge and develop their own practices to kind of achieve goals in which they want to reach. So a bit of dramaturgy, but also the knowledge and the business of the producing side of a piece of theatre as well.
Dani, would you like to?
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Dani Fecko. I live on the unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh, which is colonially known as Vancouver in Canada. And I run Fascinator Management. Fascinator is an agency and consultancy. We work with, as an agent for 11 different Canadian clients from across the country, mainly in contemporary performance practice, often often kind of rooted vaguely in theater, but very multidisciplinary. And then we also work as a consultant and a coach. So we work with multiple companies across Canada and across the world, facilitating their journey into touring, coaching them on that, and then work with various international funding bodies, facilitating international delegations coming into Canada and vice versa. So a lot of professional relationship matchmaking. That's what I do. I'm a matchmaker. It's my job.
Katy?
Hi, I'm Katy Snelling. I'm a freelance programmer in the UK. At the moment, I'm working for Pegasus Theatre, which is a small studio theatre in Oxford, working with young people, and also Hall for Cornwall in Truro, which is getting ready to reopen after a refurb, and that will be 1,300 seats. So I'm used to lots of different scales and cross art forms, so theatre, dance, circus, music, comedy. And I also work for Farnham Maltings on a project working with libraries and community centres and village halls, so looking at putting theatre and performance in non-theatre buildings. So quite a broad spectrum of places and forms.
Lynn, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everyone. My name is Lynn. I'm from Shanghai, and I'm an independent curator and consultant in performing arts. And what I mainly do is to introduce international theater productions to Chinese audience. So I do international programming for festivals and theaters, such as the Wuzhen Theater Festival, the Great Theatre of China, and also from last year, that was the Shanghai International Comedy Festival. And also I work with Chinese artists to create international collaboration opportunities for them. Yeah, so this is what I mainly do. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. And Mary, would you like to say hello?
Sure. I'm Mary Roeder. I'm part of the programming team at the University Musical Society, UMS for short. We're a multidisciplinary presenter, music, theater, and dance. We're based at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, which is just outside of Detroit. We're a major public research university. And we have a large international program, like I said, of music, theater, and dance. We also do quite a lot of arts academic integration, given our location on the campus of the University of Michigan. And like everyone, I've been working remotely, so I'm currently coming to you from a rural part of Missouri, about an hour outside of St. Louis.
Great. Okay, and Niels?
Hello, I'm Niels, calling from Berlin, Germany. I'm running, little bit the independent curator and creative producer, producing tours coming into continental Europe, mainly Germany, Austria, Switzerland, the Netherlands. Specialized in dance, contemporary dance, and physical theater circus. And I curate some festivals, and one of them is the next coming up edition of the City Contemporary Dance edition in Hong Kong.
Great. And Shoshana?
Yes, hi everyone. I am in Buenos Aires right now, Argentina, but I work remotely for Mexico City. I've been doing this for the last 2 years, pre-pandemic. So I've been going back and forth between Mexico, and I have a son here who's showing his Lego off, which is way more interesting than what I do, which is work as international producer in La Teatrería, Mexico City. La Teatrería is an independent theater venue that opened 5 years ago. And we present all sorts of artistic practices, theater, music, dance. We have a small venue. And I'm also an independent consultant interested mostly in building bridges between artists from Latin America and the rest of the world. So you'll see me working in initiatives with Canada, with Australia, with New Zealand, and with the UK as well.
Great. This feels a little like the fringe equivalent of giving the scores at the Eurovision Song Contest. But anyway, I find out
singing.
I'm Richard Jordan. I'm an independent theatre producer. I have my own production company based here in the UK. We develop, produce, and commission shows all over the world. I'm also the international associate and producing partner at Chicago Shakespeare Theatre in the US, where I'm involved with the World Stage program there, and patron of the Brighton Fringe. So thank you all for being here. As this is a conversation, you are also, as Alan said at the start, welcome to please join in, send in your messages and questions, and please take part with us. I'd like to start with asking the panel a question, which is that it was 23 weeks ago that we all suddenly, well, certainly in the UK, our world suddenly changed. It was the point that a matter of a week later, we were into a complete lockdown, all our theatres closed, and our industry, theatre industry, arts industry, literally turned on its head. What I'd like to know, and I think would be useful, is that through that period, for me, I've found it the hardest thing is the abruptness of it, the sudden change and the fragility of that. It's almost impossible to get your head around at the speed of which it's happened. But also at the same time, it felt in the UK for myself, it was quite an insular pandemic in the sense that we were only getting information about the rest of the world kind of quite piecemeal at times. So maybe there was a report about South America one day, but then we'd hear nothing else again for weeks. And I think as we've got a global attendance with us, it would be really useful if you could possibly give just a brief overview of how the situation is in your own country, and then also actually how you yourselves with your organizations are responding to that. I'll start with maybe Shoshana. Do you want to begin with that?
Sure. So I can talk about Buenos Aires and Mexico. Buenos Aires, where I am at right now, has been in lockdown since March 20, and it's been very strict. The government decided to tackle this from the very beginning and in a preventive way, in which they were like, okay, we don't want to reach these high numbers, and we are in a region where our neighbor Brazil is in a very, very bad shape right now. I think it's the second after the US in number of cases. So we've been in a very strict lockdown, and in theaters of course are closed, and I think 3 or 4 days ago, the government issued a way in which theaters can open only for streaming. Like actors can go back and do streaming from empty theaters, which is something that in Mexico we have been doing for many, many weeks now. So Mexico, on the other side, has been a little wishy-washy in terms of the mechanics of the lockdown. It's also been in lockdown since middle of March. Our venue closed even before the city issued the order to close, because we felt that it wasn't safe to be open. And because of the nature of the country, which is really big, Mexico City in itself is a very big city, the majority of the workers are, they rely on their daily going out in the street and selling, right? Like selling food or selling whatever they sell. There's a lot of street sellers in Mexico City. So people cannot work from home really. So it's much harder, and they have a sort of like a red, yellow, green, orange sort of light So one day you can be in red, and the other day you can be in green, and the other day you can be in yellow. So for theaters, it's impossible to plan anything. So most of the theater artists in Mexico City and the whole country have been doing online work, and it's also, I think it very quickly established itself, the format. Very quickly, people understood that that was going to be the way in which artists could continue working, and so it's very strong. The amount of shows that are available online are really, really strong, and there's a wide offering, very commercial to very avant-garde-ish. So I'm really surprised by the way in which the community really quickly, like you said, very abruptly, very quickly adapted. We even collaborated with Fuel, and Sonia and I worked together on a project. Fuel had a piece called Love Letters from Home, which was a Zoom performance, and La Teatrería in Mexico presented one day. And this was very early on. I can't recall now when it was, Anthony, but it was really early on. So it was very quickly, and we very quickly adapted to it.
Have you seen that pattern, Shoshana, sort of continuing? I found it was quite interesting that, you know, everyone seemed to digitally grab a camera almost and start making work. Some admittedly better than other pieces, but it felt there was a need to be a presence there. But it sort of felt as the weeks have gone on and things sort of, do you feel that same sense of solidarity is continuing, or is it becoming more strained, do you think, in the situations that you're working in?
Well, I think it's just, we need to keep going. There's no other solution. We don't have here, I've been reading about, as opposed to what you said, Richard, in Latin America, we always get news from Europe or from the US or Canada. We are always looking outside. So we know what's going on in your countries, and we don't get as much public government federal support. Like I know that in the UK, you guys are, you were asking for support, and the support is not enough, but it's a lot compared to what we get. We don't get anything. So if artists independently don't continue doing what they're doing now, they will be starving, because there's no support at all. Mm. And yes, there is solidarity. There are two initiatives that I know of. One in Buenos Aires, that people donate money and artists put together bags with food that they deliver to fellow artists. And then in Mexico, I'm part of a WhatsApp group where everyone puts whatever they can in a bank account once a month, and we distribute it to colleagues that we know they need. So this is in parallel to whatever you can produce. There are people who are not able to produce anything at all because some of them got sick, or a family member got sick and they need to take care of them. So we basically get together and get a fund, and because the government is not giving anything, not at all.
It's the great example of the theatre industry in general is its nimbleness. The arts industry's ability to be nimble has probably never been more important than it is at the moment. And it is that thing that we've always gone through adversity where people say, you can't do this, and we stand up and say, yes, you can, and find a way. In a way, we might be better served to almost be trying to solve the problems ourselves and have governments at times getting involved, because they seem to be only more hindering the problems in different ways. Niels, I can see you nodding quite a lot up there. Do you want to give an overview of what's going on in Germany and Europe as well within that, and how things have impacted on yourself?
Yes, of course. And unfortunately, coming after Shoshana, it's like we're doing a little bit better over here. And on the good side, since we were in lockdown since March 16, but it wasn't a proper lockdown. It was an advice, and people stuck to it. And it continued until sort of the beginning of our summer, where our theaters would have been closed anyway. So we only had 2 to 3 months where we postponed everything and we were promptly shut. And at the moment, the summer break provides us with the opportunity to look for solutions. And the reality is that the theatrical or cultural scene is divided into the commercial side, and the other side is the subsidized art scene. And the subsidized art scene is going to open up again in September, with, of course, the health and security restrictions, and therefore with 25 to 50, maybe 60% of the audience capacity, because they are subsidized, and therefore the public sector is sort of banking or sucking up or providing the financial realities around it. But the commercial theaters are completely shut down, and they have at the moment rather no hope in coming back until October or November. And that's the reality that that the arts is non-relevant to our system as well. And therefore nodding is that it's us once again to help to provide artists to get together, to find creative solutions in order to survive.
Can I ask a question about Germany and when it happened? And similar with the US and Canada and China. One of the big things that happened in the UK was when we were advised to close, the theatres obviously chose that because quite rightly they were putting safety before profit. But it meant that we were hit in many instances where insurance just couldn't be claimed. It's left many companies, theatres in a perilous state because there hasn't been any support that's come through as a result of that. Has that been a similar picture have you found in your own countries as well? Mary, did that affect yourselves in the States in a bad way, or have you had more of the support within insurance and that situation?
I mean, there's not really been any support. You know, a lot of the unemployment funding and things like that came through were not easily or not accessible at all by those that draw freelance income. And the thing that that became even more complicated, and that in the next round of stimulus funding that's moving through, they're trying to address is those folks that might draw more regular income, you know, taxed income from a regular employer, but also have freelance income, and how lost income kind of across those different kinds of streams of income, how it just was it was impossible for people to draw unemployment. And I can just say for us as an organization that was grappling in a very immediate short term with how to deal with contracts that people couldn't deliver on, you know, we were left scrambling, trying to figure out like what could we actually do to take care of the artists? What obligation did we have to artists whose shows never came to fruition and who we could not guarantee a reschedule? And, you know, we couldn't do a one size fits all approach to that. And we did our best to really come through on artist fees for folks kind of at the more kind of grassroots level, or who didn't have regular big tours that they could rely on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a big one. I imagine, Anthony, I assume Fool had multiple shows in development and production at that point, and certainly that must have hit quite hard, that sudden lockdown. And were you affected badly with this insurance situation? I mean, I know we were in my company.
Yeah, it was some very clever wording by the government, which allowed insurance companies to not have to pay out. And there were a number of shows that, were happening. And there was a word that started going around as so often happens in the arts sector, is called unproducing. And suddenly our team became experts in unproducing a number of shows that were happening, and a number of R&Ds as well. Let's not forget that it wasn't just the shows that were going into spaces, but it was people who were in rehearsal, people who couldn't suddenly be in a team of people that they had spent weeks and weeks with. So suddenly, you know, work that we have been thinking about for next year has been affected. So it's not only the short term of here and now, but it's also, well, what's going to happen next year with those shows. I think very much in the same way that Mary's been saying, Kate, who's our director of Fuel and Fuel as a whole, I guess we just had to concentrate on the artists that we were working with, and that mushroomed out into the artists within the sector, to make sure that we were helping as many people as we could. We were trying to move contracts or move R&Ds around so that we could still pay artists. maybe doing something that they were going to be doing in 6 months and just bringing it forward because we had some of that budget sitting there. And I think really the majority as well of the time, especially for me, was looking after our own team. I think there's that thing of, and Richard and Katy, I know you'll probably agree, producers are often seen as this kind of front. There's a front rather than just the human person that's behind that. And actually a massive part of my job was just making sure that our colleagues are okay. We stopped working from the office a week before the UK locked down because a number of our colleagues just were too upset to go on the tube. So as an organization, we had to make that decision quite quickly. I'm really glad we did, just because it meant that our colleagues knew we were there to back them to the hilt. So that's what we've been up to.
And I think that's one of the biggest things, Anthony, that you hit on there as well, that's troubled me and worried me an awful lot, is actually the mental health issues that we're seeing running through this pandemic. And obviously they're compounded, obviously, with lockdown, with many of the people who are watching today in our webinar, or possibly people who are coming to the Edinburgh Fringe this year who had projects that have all been abandoned. There's a tremendous sense of loneliness and isolation. I have to say, as producers, there is as well. I mean, producing can be the most lonely profession in the world, but it's also a journey where, you know, we're sort of all in this together. But the mental health issues and the consequences of that afterwards, I think are very relevant and something that needs to be addressed. And turning to you, Dani, obviously in Canada, you're working with a great deal of emerging artists, and I imagine the effect that that's having for a number of them must be devastating. But also, what's going on within Canada, and how are some of the steps that you're doing within that to try and work and see where your practices are going at this moment in time?
Sure, yeah. So just a quick overview of what's happening in Canada. I mean, to begin with, you know, we're a very large country. So what's happening for me in the West Coast doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening for my colleagues in Ontario or Quebec or in the Maritimes. We're very far away from each other. So I can speak quite kind of vaguely to their experience and quite specifically to mine. We are very lucky also that we have funding bodies. So I must say that our Canada Council for the Arts was very reactive, very quickly, and many people got advances, just quite no questions asked, like, here's 25% of whatever, 25% of your highest award from the last 3 years, whether it was project or operating, just in your bank account. That didn't happen right away, but quite quickly, which was great. And then we also had something through our government called CERB, which was a $2,000 kind of basic income, and that was freelancers and gig artists, people who didn't qualify for regular unemployment could get onto that. So that's coming to an end now, but it's also kind of being sucked into EI and unemployment insurance. So we are very lucky that we've had support for folks there. From a kind of practical standpoint in what's happening theatrically, again, it's shifting across the country, but I can say for BC, and I think that this is sort of a pretty common thing, is we have a limit of 50 people in our houses. And so various theater companies are making different decisions. For other, kind of like Niels was saying, you know, August is usually sort of a quiet month in theater land. So at first everyone was going online, and then it's kind of calmed down this month. But different theaters are making different decisions. Some people are saying we'll do 50 in the house and we'll live stream. Some people are just doing 50 in like a 500 seat house because we still have to do all of the social distancing. The issue that some of us are running into with going digital is our unions, actually, because our theater union and our film union have a contra agreement. So as soon as anything is broadcast, like this, on Zoom, if it's on the internet, they have to pay their film agreement as well if they're part of the theater agreement, which is making things very expensive. Not that we don't want to be paying artists, but it is, you know, when you're, I don't need to explain the finances to everybody.
No, it's an interesting point though, Dani, because I was on a call yesterday about American road touring, and one of the points that came up there was I think there's 25 unions currently involved in the negotiation. And of course, once you hit that point, you almost hit an impasse, because of course you've got so many different comments coming in the room, you know, and quite rightly, you're wanting to make sure everyone is being protected and looked after, but you can reach an impasse that you can't conclude anything. And I think that actually is one of the things that is going to get challenging, is how that works in a harmonious way, but actually also how we find a solution to get through that. And certainly issues such as social distancing and making things easier in terms of performance scales will help that within that. But also there's a question of time here, because I'm, you know, with Canada, I imagine with artists who are developing work, there is a time where they're getting work ready, but obviously there needs to be a time then with a solution that we can get it out and get it onto the stages, and you know, with sufficient time to get that up and running.
It's totally true. And it's also this thing of, if you're not in the union, if you're a non-equity, non-CAE performer, then you don't actually run into those things. So it's going to be a flip there. I would also be remiss if I didn't speak about the impact that the murder of George Floyd has had in our country and in the conversation that we're having. Richard, earlier you mentioned about how abruptly things change. And I think that something that we took away from that was also going, well, why haven't we changed things faster? Why are we still doing things the same way? And when that happened, and with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, and in this sort of dormant producing thing, what's happening a lot is a lot of conversation around our institutions, how they're run, why they're run that way, who's running them, how it can be more equitable, how it can be more decolonized. So while we are talking about the work getting back on stages, there's also a lot of conversations about whose work is getting back on our stages and who's producing it.
I was going to say that's one of the things that's come out of lockdown that actually is if we're looking at any plus points, is that it has afforded a time to think. I mean, very rarely do we have a point where the industry stops and there's a point to take notice and start a discussion. We actually had an enforced stop. And actually, you know, this has meant that there are certain things that we can evaluate that we were sort of, this didn't work. And perhaps we need to go back and we need to rethink about this and look at this again. I mean, one of the worries I have in the UK, and Katy, I'd be interested to hear what you think, is that in terms of the recovery, in terms of the 1.57 billion, of which the theatre and the arts industries will get a proportion of that, a lot of it's got to go into simply rescuing buildings. It almost came too late, and it's being important. And as we already know, that money is likely to maybe get us to Christmas, but it's going to be a struggling time to come out. Freelancers aren't really represented within that particularly, if at all. And I think the problem being is that in some ways for discussion, we're at such a speed of trying to patch up the problems that we don't necessarily get to a point that we afford ourselves as much time for the discussions that also perhaps need to happen. I don't know, Katy, what you think. I mean, obviously with the venues you're working at and the scale that you're doing with some of those companies, obviously a lot of those have been faced, I imagine, with redundancies and scaling down of the organisation and things. And how are you finding that situation amongst the artists and the venues that you're working within and at the minute?
Yeah, it's very difficult at the moment to sort of do anything. I initially, when lockdown started, I like Anthony spent a lot of time looking after people and a lot of time talking to people, if only to say, we don't know yet, but we'll be in touch. We haven't forgotten you. What can we do? What money can we release to you? But as time's gone on, we still have no greater understanding or picture on what the future looks like. And one of the things I've been doing is trying really hard to pick up the phone and call artists rather than send them an email, because so often they're trying to contact programmers who are on furlough now, who may be being made redundant or going through a redundancy program now, and just sort of meeting this wall of silence and not knowing about how to plan themselves. And I think the reality of the large package is that actually very little of it will get down to regional art centres. I think it will go to protecting big institutions and those smaller art centres that aren't grabbing the headlines necessarily, who possibly don't even need, I won't go too much into details, but you have to apply for at least £50,000 and you have to have spent that money by March. So you have to be sort of at point of closure. And there's a lot of organisations that aren't at that point right now, but do need a little bit to get them to still be able to be in existence come April. And so there is this sort of almost band of organisations that feel slightly forgotten and not heard, who are trying to do their best, who have most of their staff still on furlough, and artists sort of going, what is going to happen, or do we just need to go away for a little bit, which is really sad. What is great is that you sort of see people trying really hard and rethinking about their purpose. So in part because of Black Lives Matter, but also the whole pandemic, what is their arts organisation's role in their community? It's not necessarily about getting people through the doors to watch a show on a Saturday evening anymore. It's about, okay, if we can't do a play, can we be a food bank? Can we do something outdoors? What is it that our community needs? And that's been really refreshing, sort of reinvestigating our connection to our communities and audiences.
And I think that's a really important point, Katy, because you can't work on a one-fits-all rule in this model. And I mean, I think it's been interesting because, I mean, Andrew Lloyd Webber obviously has been getting the London Palladium. For some of you who don't live in the UK, may not know, it's one of the very large West End theatres. He's been trying to get his theatre COVID ready, which has been with lots of stuff from Korea being flown in, which will spray the auditorium and things, which is fine if you've got maybe a big musical, I don't know, like Wicked or Joseph Mendes Technical Dreamcoat playing, but it's a lot harder if you were trying to apply that into an arts centre, if not near on impossible with the costs of that. But of course, one of the things being is because of who he is, he can get a lot more coverage and attention in the media than perhaps, you know, a smaller venue like the Farnham Maltings in the UK. And actually, it's the balance of those voices. And I think you're absolutely right. It's very important that we don't get lost, you know, that doesn't get lost. And also the fact of the outreach work that's actually these theatres like yourselves have been undertaking through the pandemic, which has perhaps been more important than it's ever been before.
Yeah, we've definitely worked with segments of our communities that we just wouldn't come through the door for theatre, but come through the door because they have a need, they have a question, they don't know where to go for help. And we found ourselves working with local taxi companies who are out of work because nobody's going anywhere, and food banks, Meals on Wheels, who can no longer use their volunteers to deliver the food. So suddenly put those two together and you're helping, but it's made us talk to people that we wouldn't normally be talking to, and I really hope that carries on afterwards. Certainly it doesn't feel like we'll be able to go back to a full presenting model anytime soon. Another of the organisations I'm working for, Pegasus, we're exploring doing a few pilot events, performances in the autumn if we are allowed, but actually what we're putting all our energy into the participation classes for young people. So it's a shift, and that feels really important, and I think something that felt like it was in the water anyway, but the abruptness of this has just brought it right forward. And theatre makers, whether you be on the venue side or the artist side, we're doers. We're not waiters. We're not passive. We're always looking for those opportunities and things to do. So I think that's a skill that's really come out right now.
Of course, what we do, and so much of the product, is driven by what we put on the stages. And obviously that is as available as what the product can be that's touring out there. And I know, Lynn, you, of course, are one of the people who is quite regularly traveling around the world, you know, looking for that, you know, exciting new company that you can possibly take to both bring into the Asian regions and indeed elsewhere. And I imagine the effects have been quite challenging both on you, but also as China was building a very strong touring ecology with work, the effect, I assume, on the theatre industry there and indeed in audience confidence has perhaps changed a little bit. I'd be interested to know what's going on.
Sure. I guess situation in here is a little bit different in this part of the world, particularly in China, where the pandemic first broke out. So we're kind of ahead of time in the situation, because like when you look at Shanghai now, I feel like everything is pretty much back to normal already. So for example, like museums are open, restaurants are packed again, and even Disneyland is open. And theaters reopened about 2 months ago with 30% capacity limit. And it has just announced that they can raise that to 50% from today. So when you or walking on the street, you see like fewer and fewer people in mask. So it's kind of like you feel this is gone, but just with very minor outbreaks here and there across the country, because China is a big country. So just about a month ago, there was like a minor outbreak in Beijing. People sort of freak out because that was from like a seafood market, just like exactly what it first happened in Wuhan, but it turned out to be like really not a big deal. And recently that was the imported cases that China pays a lot of attention to. So still the border is closed to foreigners, but just from yesterday, I think China has started to slowly open to European citizens who have a valid visa. So if they have an essential reason to travel to China, they can. But still, I mean, the border control is still very, very strict because the imported cases is the #1 priority now. But in terms of me, like the work I do, because most of what I do is international touring, international collaboration. So for me, this year is really, really difficult. So almost all my projects have been canceled, and I was trying to reschedule, but it's just impossible to reschedule with so many uncertainties out there. And so I just mentioned border was closed. So still the performance permit that, you know, when you put on a show in China, you need that performance permit. So that permit, issue the permit, that thing has been suspended since the pandemic happened. So we don't know when that will restart. So with that being suspended, it's impossible to get people in to perform in here. I mean, international artists to perform in China. So yeah, so now theaters, they have 50% capacity, and also they take out this 1 meter social distancing. So you can basically just sit every one other seat, and it's much, much better than before. And also a lot of the theaters, they're opening up their outdoor spaces, trying to make more use of the outdoor space to put on outdoor shows. And also, yeah, digital, I mean, live streaming. When the pandemic first broke out, like everyone has been reacting pretty quickly, surprisingly, like just suddenly everyone is doing things online. And, but I mean, the bad thing is really, because I just heard like government support or funding, but in China, there was like nothing, literally zero, nothing. So it's really, really hard for artists, especially for independent artists, freelance producers, you know, independent cultural workers. I know like some of them, they just changed job, and they kind of like start to do something like in the food industry, because still people need to eat, right? So they cook something and they sell online on their WeChat. So like people start to do that, and because there's just nothing, no kind of any kind of support from the government, which is really, really challenging. But now I guess because things are getting better and they're just coming back to normal. So with still difficult to get international shows to China. So it's kind of like an opportunity for Chinese artists for them to be seen, and more opportunities opening for them. So for example, the Great Theatre of China that I work with, they just recently announced like an initiative called the Mini Drama. So it's like an open call for emerging Chinese artists. So they are invited to create like short works of 10 to 15 minutes, and that would be recorded and then live streamed on the WeChat official account. So something like that. And also there are like more new productions being made. I mean, just domestic Chinese productions putting on stage. But
are
still,
you seeing audiences feeling confident in coming back? Because I think that's the big concern. Is I think we'll see, you know, certainly the diehards coming who would come, but you know, that's not necessarily going to make the numbers that we need to be able to make our shows, you know, sell tickets and play. And I guess is that an issue that you are seeing audiences coming back at the moment or not?
Actually, not really, because we had concern like before. Even the theater reopened, audience will feel reluctant to go to theater, maybe the security reason or whatever. But actually, because I've been to quite a few shows already, like these days. So my own observation, and also based on the conversations and discussions I had with my colleagues, like audience are reacting they're embracing, like the theaters are coming back. So even because when it was only 30%, it's just so easy to fill the 30% seats. So like very fast, like a lot of the shows are just sold out quickly. So today it just started 50%. We'll see how it goes. So for, like next week, I'll go see a show and see how it goes with the audience, with how they react to the 50%. Like
Mary, do you think that will be a solution for UMS? Do you think that audiences will be confident? I mean, I know that in some theatres within the States, they've lost subscribers as they've gone forwards, and I think holding on to some of those because of the economic changes has been tough, certainly for some theatres in the States. Do you think that the subscriber model is going to exist and still survive in the States? And do you think there's going to be confidence in coming back to UMS?
Well, most of the subscribers are older folks or health compromised folks. And I think it's, it's impossible. No one likes to talk about that. But I think that those things are inextricably linked. Everyone is putting surveys out to, kind of test audiences' sort of bravery and sort of interest in returning. And, the numbers go up and down. And interestingly, one of the greatest indicators of people's willingness to go back is like seeing other people go back. So I just don't know. It's just going to be a slow roll back to some version of normal after this. I can just say currently, my working reality is in Michigan, which was one of the early hotspots, in particular the Black and Arab and immigrant communities centered in and around Detroit. And luckily, similar to New York, one of the other early hotspots, we've been doing a really good job under the leadership of our governor to control things. With that said, Michigan, which is like always one of the bright green states, like when you see the map of the United States, we're still in what we're calling stage 4, which is flattening. Stage 5 is containing, and stage 6 is post-pandemic. In stage 4, where we currently are, indoor performance is not possible. And even outdoor performance is limited to gatherings of about 100. And so it's just, it's hard for any of us to imagine that changing anytime soon. I envy you, Lynn, and that return to normal, but for us, we're very much in it.
And so where does that sit for yourselves and sort of long-term programming, Mary? Because I mean, I guess you're sitting with that shadow always of could there be a second wave, which we're hearing about as being a possibility. But in terms of longer-term plan, does that mean you've had to entirely re-strategize how you might program in the length and the longitude? Because of course, many theatres outside of the UK, which traditionally programs quite late, often program seasons far more ahead than we do here.
Well, we a bit delusionally announced a full season back in April, and we've subsequently, our season runs September through April, and we've canceled essentially all of our fall programming. We have a couple of outdoor events that are kind of waiting in the wings to action as soon as we move to stage 5. The big innovation in the US comes to us really from like the popular country music scene. Like people love to tailgate, people love outdoor concerts. I don't know if people know what tailgating is. It's like having picnics and drinking beer before sporting events, like in parking lots. And so like, kind of taking that model to big outdoor concerts. And so, we're exploring doing some drive-in style stuff in college football tailgate locations. We've also been able to take a bunch of the resources we had tied up in live performances into some digital commissions that will hopefully have some live components when it's safe to do so. We've got our January through April season still live, and we're hopeful something might happen there. The vaccine development and manufacturing is interestingly, like a lot of it's happening in Michigan. And so we wonder if we might have some earlier access to some of that and how that might impact our ability to do certain things. There's the kind of long-term planning is still happening, but the sort of short-term has just been a series of pivots and pivots and pivots and pivots away from pivots.
And again, I assume that then comes back into the question of confidence, because if an audience is preparing, then it sees a work's cancelled again, and then does it change the whole ecology of, for example, people booking in advance for something anymore because they don't?
Well, I mean, people, aside from the subscribers, which have been shrinking, you know, we don't, you know, we see a lot of last minute ticket purchase. So I'm not, I don't know that that will change too drastically, just that behavior itself.
Niels, in Europe, you obviously have a subscription model as well, and I know there's some comeback in the situation. And both you and Anthony, obviously, as producers who produce both, in Europe and around the world, are you looking at new strategies that you're working with, and are you moving into perhaps both of you international licensing more and thinking about those strands, so you could localize work that you were creating more than maybe taking international companies out on tour?
The interesting thing on our side is that the long-term planning is absolutely happening. So everybody sort of thinks that season 21-22 is going to be rather back to normal, as everybody sort of believes that if we don't have anything until then, we are doomed anyway. And therefore, a lot of people, and including us, we came up with what we call creative concepts, and put on local talent and producing them and putting them in the slots of international companies which have dropped out, and came up with security and health concepts on stage, off stage, and built sort of corona cohorts, meaning putting artists together in sort of housing together, and therefore being allowed to touch and do work together. Which changed our approach. And the interesting thing, what we see from the theaters, is that they're absolutely happy to invite, I wouldn't say anything, but quality product, which is sort of COVID proved and can be presented safely to an audience. And therefore things changed a lot in the subscription scheme, which yes, dropped on our side as well significantly. But as we see in Shanghai as well, filling 30% is not a difficult task, and the audience wants to come back and wants to see performances and wants to exchange and meet.
And in that model, Niels, are you finding if a theatre is saying, yes, I want to book your show for 2021, 2022, are they offering you a protection within that in case suddenly there is a second wave or a spike that would enforce a closure? And are you also, as an addendum to that, are you also planning touring, so you're going as sort of just set down runs, or are you looking at being able to tour across a multitude of venues?
We are touring back to back from 21 onwards. And yes, everybody is putting a COVID-19 clause into the agreements. And therefore, that is the difficulty we are facing at the moment, because everybody is sort of structuring it differently. But not on the nice side, everybody looks into supporting each other, which is a good thing. And therefore, non-refundable expenditure sort of is covered by everyone.
Right. Are you finding the same? Oh,
that's
sorry.
one of the heartening things for me to come out of this sort of the quick pivots and the cancellations, is really having to address some transparency and scrutiny in the way contracts are structured, lack of consistency, and sort of, I don't know how it works over in other parts of the world, but in the US, you will often see what's called a good faith clause included in contracts. That always still kind of feels a little one-sided. And so we've been really able to spend some time drafting a COVID addendum, but also something that I think will inform contracts going forward, that assures, that sort of reflects more authentic, mutually assured protections. And also thinking about the ways that we structure deposits and things like that, actually building more of those kinds of things in. The ways that we've structured these digital commissions we're working on, there's a lot more money that comes on the front end to support the thought, labor, and hours that go into things. So, the artists aren't left disproportionately holding the bag at the end of things when something might not ultimately come to fruition.
Right. As I said earlier, this is obviously a webinar for all of you watching. If you've got questions, then do please keep do send them through chat, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. Andy, just going to you, are you thinking about models in new models with Fuel? Are you moving into licensing models and localizing work, or are you still working again also on a plan of international touring?
Yeah, we're kind of a little bit behind where Niels is, I guess. So at the moment, we're trying to kind of put the shows that have been postponed by venues, put those into some type of plan for next year. We've also started looking at other models. Shoshana touched on it earlier, but there's a few shows that we've kind of brought back to life with more of a digital edge to it. So that's something that we've been exploring a lot more. And there are a number of artists as well who work with apps to, I guess, to almost open source some of their creativity. So there's a few artists who are creating some apps that will share choreography, and that can then be kind of shared with dancers who can learn that choreography and then perform that in their own local areas. So almost like a franchise model. So there's a number of different ways in which we're trying to kind of, I guess, help the shows that have already been put in place, but also future proof. And then the last thing to mention is that I never realized how important it would be to have a team of producers, but a team of production managers on our team. And for us, we've suddenly become experts in how to socially distance and have rehearsals where everyone feels safe, and also bring huge reams of documents into how we're protecting our artists and audiences into venues as well. So so that's the other side of what we've been working on.
Do we all, go ahead, Neil.
We have, or I'm facing a big problem over here, which I call, or everybody would call, the domino effect, as every production that we postpone has the notion of that the theatres we've been booked in are entitled in good faith to look for a new opportunity and performance opportunity / new dates, which means next season is going to be extremely full, and new productions which would go out on the market have nearly no opportunity and chances to be seen, since everything that has been postponed and is still alive will take off, or will take all the available dates. And that's a very difficult scenario we are facing over here in order to get around the domino effect, which will be around, at least here in Germany, for the next 2 to 3 years.
Going forward as well, Dani, it's a question for you, and also Mary in this as well. Do we think that the global industry is shrinking in a way? It's a question for everyone, but do we also think, where does that leave us with artists that are emerging and through training? I mean, obviously UMS, University of Michigan, has a very successful School of Stage and Screen that also exists. But do we also think that for this next generation of artists coming up, it's going to be harder for them to get their voices being heard? And how are we as practitioners going to actually try and deal with that, particularly maybe at a time when venues might be more compelled to be perhaps less risk adverse, if it was, for example, taking on a new voice? Are there strategies and things that we should be looking at within that? And also the transparencies of work that we're coming through within that and how we present it. And Shoshana, maybe you've got thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I'd like to share something that has been making me really happy in the past months. One of the things that I've been investing a lot of my time with other colleagues is in conversations, hosting conversations online among artists, and in general, trying to bring to the room, to the Zoom room, the voices that are not usually heard. So I've been enjoying very much that. So I've been working with Christopher McDowell in the US and Juan Pablo Siles in the US and Laura Martinez. We've been putting together a series of Latinx artists conversations that are just for ourselves. We don't broadcast it. We don't put it anywhere. It's just a room where we bring artists from Latin America and the US that are identified as Latinx artists, and we have different themes, and we've been having conversations, and just these spaces are not based on trading, or trading or pitching anything. It's just getting to know each other, and I think those type of spaces are really useful now because the urgency to produce. Yes, beautiful. The urgency to produce, but it's not. The production is not going to go anywhere now, right? So if I have time in my hands and I can't produce because I'm not going to sell this production to anyone, I'm not going to tour because there's a lot of uncertainty in Latin America, at least. We can't, we never were able to program with 1 year or 2 years like you guys in Europe do sometimes. We are thinking about 6 months from now, usually, and now it's not even 6 months from now, now it's next week. So because we cannot do that, so we sit together and talk and think and imagine. And I think that's been wonderful. So we've done that. I know Judy Harquail is here listening to the webinar, so we've been doing that also between artists from Canada and Argentina. So I've been enjoying very much those spaces in which we try to bring artists together and usually people that they don't know each other. So it's sort of like the prologue to a future collaboration, because we cannot be in the room together collaborating in a specific production now. At least we can get to know each other and hope that when we meet in person, we'll have a lot to work with.
So as dreadful as the situation is, do you think it's afforded a greater opportunity for creativity?
Well, I don't know, because like Anthony said, there's a lot of self-care involved, right? Like sometimes we don't feel in our best to have the best idea ever, but at least we can get to know each other and see where our minds are and spark thoughts in other people's minds. So maybe we don't have a great idea now, but we are sort of planting seeds for a future great idea.
I think there's also freedom now, just relating back to what you said before, Richard, about emerging artists versus venues. And I think anything goes right now. We don't need large stages. An emerging artist, I know somebody who was doing peephole puppet shows for people in their apartment building. They were for the kids in their apartment building with found puppet objects. Art we don't need institutions. And I think this moment has been showing us that so much. And the voices that are coming up are demanding that we listen to them on their terms, not that they come to us on our terms. And what an opportunity we have to totally reinvent the way that we consider those conversations, that we don't need the subscriber model is great. It's, it works for some, but we don't need it. Isn't it what a joy it is to be able to have a concert in your front yard, or to think about these new ways to engage together and to really reinvent the way that we have these conversations. So I think also what Shoshana's saying is we haven't forgotten how to talk to each other. We just can't do it in person, but we have this fertile ground now to be creating these relationships, to be getting to know each other, and to be deeply listening and learning in a way that maybe we haven't allowed ourselves to do. I'm also very interested in the moment right now to allow things to die gracefully, which I think is an industry we haven't, I haven't seen very much, but you didn't fuck it up. COVID killed it for you. What a beautiful moment to be able to say it wasn't me, it was the global pandemic.
And sometimes you do have to knock a few things over to be able to come back and rebuild them stronger again. I think that's the other thing. To me, I suppose the one thing that worries me is that it doesn't become in any way that the industry gets allowed to become elitist, and we have to watch that because people just simply can't afford to work in it anymore. So actually, you know, if you've not got a trust fund, suddenly, sorry, you can't work in the theatre industry, you can't go and, you know, you can't train. And I think those voices of the generation that are coming up, we have to do everything we can as practitioners to try and make sure we're trying to push them front and centre. And actually that's sometimes very hard when you're fighting government and you're fighting funding and things, because obviously the familiarity is something often that they will often lurch towards. And I imagine, you know, for example, with you, Dani, and Katy as well, with the work that you're doing with a number of the young emerging coaches coming through the arts centres and venues you're working at, that must be also a great fight that you're trying to deal with at the moment.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm trying to do, and sort of picking up on both those points, noticing my own moods, I'm a much happier person on the days I speak to artists. I find just that creative thinking process gives me hope in a way that other things don't. But I'm also very aware that that artist is giving up their time and trying to find ways to pay them for it, whether that's about small commissions or helping them write funding applications or whatever it is, that those conversations, I'm really lucky and privileged. I'm being paid a salary by a lot of people, but that artist isn't necessarily. So I think it's important that while we're still talking to those artists, we're acknowledging that they need paying for their time as much as I'm getting paid for my time.
How are you finding it in China, Lynn, with new voices and artists coming through? Are a lot of artists abandoning, or have they been more, you know, fooled as a situation to try and come back stronger and fight more in this situation?
I think a lot of them are still figuring out how to survive. And because of zero support from the government, so we need to really find their own means, like simply how to go through, you know, how to pay their bills. So, but the good thing is that really things are returning to normal, so that they will have gig opportunities and audience are buying tickets. So kind of, you know, it's just returning to the new normal, I guess. Yeah.
We're coming close up to our hour of time together. And I just wanted to ask, I suppose, a question that sort of for everyone is, you know, I suppose, what happens to hope at the end of the evening, in the sense of the feel of, you know, what do we all want to see and hope that we can see? I mean, obviously, Dani, you've touched brilliantly on the fact of it being an opportunity, but, you know, it's an opportunity that we all need to embrace and work together. What are the hopes and ambitions? You know, I mean, we can't find a solution, although I think amongst, if we all sat down together with everyone who's watching, we perhaps after a couple of hours together might be able to come up with something that could come forward. Does it all sit on a vaccine? You know, are we actually not going to see any return to anything happening in a realistic way unless there is a vaccine found? I mean, we've got these wonderful pockets of work that are developing. There's been an element of creativity that's made us think in different ways, but how do we galvanize all of that strategically together? And, you know, what's the hope going forwards? What do we think? What would we like to see in a year or 2 years time within this? Will it take that long to recover? Will it take longer? Mary, what do you think?
You know, the way I'm going to answer that question is sort of focused on some of the stuff that Dani started to bring up early on. And I think it's this question of kind of mass accountability and scrutiny and transparency around all kinds of processes, value systems, leadership, compensation, and all the assumptions that are embedded in all of that. In the US in particular, like in the museum world, there are very visible, very public, high stakes things that are happening, like monumental shifts, just like questions of diversity and equity, but also just like compensation transparency, like radical transparency, public spreadsheets that are going around, just the outing of long-standing workplace abuses that you couldn't even imagine. And then just, you know, the lack of accountability of boards to manage this, boards that have just been on autopilot. You know, there are museums that are unionizing. There are, you know, the number of like Instagram accounts that are just like museums are racist, orchestras are racist, like fill in the blank are racist. Like, you know, you can call it vigilante justice or you can call it the revolution, but like this brings me hope that like if you're not taking care of this stuff on the home front, asking these questions internally at your organizations, someone else is going to call your shit out, and like, get ready.
Dani, do you want to add into that? I think Mary sort of hit the nail on the head, really.
I mean, nope. I got nothing to add. What she said.
Well done.
Yeah, Katy, what do you think? I mean, in terms of the position that we're in the UK regionally and the areas and the artists and people you're working, what's the hope? What would you like to see happening now? What's this? Is there a solution? What are we dependent on a vaccine? Are we, is there hope? Have we reasons to be hopeful?
I think we have reasons to be hopeful. There will always be artists making. That doesn't require buildings. I think we will probably lose some buildings. We've already lost a few. That's painful and hard. But I think trying to go back to trying to save what we were is going to take way too much energy, and we do need to look at what we don't want to go back to. What's different, what we're leaving in the past, what we're leaving behind. Is that institutional racism? Is that elitism? Is that gatekeepers and closed doors? There is an opportunity for the artists more than ever to be heard, as long as we can find a way for them to still be there, to still be existing. So I'm hopeful. Tomorrow I might feel differently. I'll be very honest about my roller coasters of mood. They vary, but I think things like this, like people coming together and talking, and even across all our different continents and problems and in different contract systems and lead times, there's a sort of unity of will that we will still be here come next year, and that's really hopeful.
24 hours in the COVID virus is a very long time. I've learned, that so much can change, in those days of things where things come forwards, and certainly the up and downs of feeling that emotion is something I've certainly felt, viscerally quite a lot during this pandemic as it's rolled on and on. Lynn, what about for yourself? In terms of looking ahead and plans and both with your own work, but also as in Asia and the theatre scene within over and the art scene within over there.
Yeah, I mean, trying to plan out for next year and some still working on the rescheduling, especially for the second half of next year, that I'm kind of more positive about, that's probably the right timing, but I'm not very sure about the first half of 2021. It's still too soon. But now I'm kind of focusing on some writing and researching projects instead of this big touring projects. So reflecting on my previous experience, I've been writing, contributing for the WeChat official account for Great Theatre of China, writing about my previous experience visiting festivals around the world. And also I'm now working with the Gold Institute in Shanghai on a research project about inclusive society in East Asia. So sort of doing something a little bit different than what I used to, but still I'm in this arts and culture world, and stay strong and resilient. And something very encouraging I like to share with you guys, there is one country, probably the only country in the world that still is doing international touring, that is Korea. So actually they just finished the Phantom of the Opera 2 days ago, and they're opening Cats, which is the international crew and cast. That's going to open in September, and that's going to run for 2 months in Seoul and other parts of the country. So that's really, it sounds crazy, but it is happening.
Do you think, though, for China, it'll rest on a vaccine, or do you think we're going to be in a position where, and before international touring starts again, do you think it's going to sit until that point? Or
I would say vaccine is vital. Yeah. So I mean, once the vaccine is available, I think that will be really completely open. But now it's still a little bit, just you can't really tell, because once it's open, maybe this is like second wave, or just, you know, it's just too risky. So I don't think the country will take that risk. Yeah.
It's just great to be sitting down amongst colleagues and friends and talking about theatre again. You feel very alone, and it's good. And Niels, it feels like there's reasons to be hopeful within this. I mean, I came on this conversation wondering how I would feel by the end of it. I'm coming out of it feeling quite hopeful, and you know, I wouldn't say, you know, nervous and anxious, but I'm also quite hopeful about the opportunities that may be being presented to us in industry. And it feels like, I mean, do you feel the same as that?
I believe the collective benefit, collaboration, and thought of empathic leadership is going to be crucial to the change we are going to.
Yeah. Anthony, yourself over in Fuel and with your own plans. Again, I mean, you know, with the amazing group of artists that you work with as well, you know, I imagine the creativity has been, you know, quite rife during this period. But also, you know, do you feel hopeful going forwards, and do you feel that that's going to be something that we're going to see a recovery, you know, soon, or in the next couple of years, or do you think it's going to take longer than that?
I think you know, one thing that hasn't been mentioned is the looming recession that is coming. There is the reality that the arts world is one of the most beautiful sectors. That's why I'm in it. But at the end of the day, it is a business as well, and we will be affected by this worldwide recession that is absolutely on its way. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for the sector. I don't know about myself, but I'm hopeful for the sector, because history shows that when the chips are down, that's when some of the best art has come out. That's when there's been a massive shift in what people see as great art. And I think that's going to happen. You know, our government have gone and released a rescue package, which essentially talks about the crown jewels. And you're right. You know, the fuels and other smaller organizations might slip through those cracks, and actually there'll be a massive rebellion, I think, if that happens, not for Fuel, but for other organizations and across the board and across the world. And that's what I'm hopeful for. I think there needs to be change. Mary hit the nail on the head. Like, it's transparency, and it's been something that, you know, has been the kind of murky thing that's never been talked about in the arts world, and it's come to light now, and I can't wait to see what happens with it. Like, I'm really excited.
Yeah, so we've got right to feel excited and positive amid all the challenges. You know, it's also about how you take these adversities and try and turn them into the positivity within that as well. And Shoshana, I know you're already in the depths of setting up a festival for the end of this year. You know, I can't think of probably something really more hopeful than to be trying to connect with artists and be bringing them together and thinking about new ways of going forwards within that. But do you think, again, also within the long-term recovery, within the situation of international work, with international collaborations, you know, the future is a strong one within that. It's better than it was, you know, it's better than it was before, even possibly because of where we are. I mean, obviously that we may get new voices coming in within there, and we may find a new way of working that actually seeds more collaborations, but actually creates a transparency, as Mary was talking about, that brings more voices and more focus. And as we know, the arts is a catalyst always for change.
Yeah, and in where I live in Buenos Aires, we lived through a brutal dictatorship, like just 40 years ago. And artists were silenced, artists were killed, theaters were burned down, books were banned, and we are here again, you know. And the beautiful independent theater scene in Buenos Aires actually was post-dictatorship, when people, it was a pandemic because we couldn't go out, we couldn't go to theaters, we couldn't say what we wanted. We were wearing a mask, you know, metaphorically. And then when it was gone, theaters started to pop in every house. When you come to Buenos Aires, to the International Festival in Buenos Aires, you basically go into people's houses to see plays, like very much like in the Fringe, right? Every place becomes a venue. So we have survived that. So I'm super hopeful, and I'm sure we will survive this as well, and we will recover, because we are creative and we work with creators, and we're always imagining the impossible. So I'm really hopeful that this will become a reality soon, hopefully, and we will be able to collaborate internationally. As we were saying before, you know, like the example I gave with Anthony, I think if the pandemic didn't exist, it would have been harder for me and Fuel, for La Teatrería and Fuel to collaborate, right? So I think we will find ways in which we will continue collaborating.
So, I mean, maybe, you know, in conclusion of our time together, perhaps the thing, you know, to look at is to say that ultimately the most important thing is we know within the art is putting on work that we all believe in, that it's transparent, that we collaboratively work together, perhaps more so than ever, with forming new relationships and new ideas, and actually a whole new world of possibilities, and looking at that and finding a way of, when you're saying you can't do that, finding a way to stand up and saying, yes, we can, and showing a way of how you can do it so people stand up and listen to us. And perhaps out of that, coming out of that, so we actually feel that we're actually as an industry stronger, that the situation makes us stronger. But that will only work if we work harmoniously and both nationally, locally and internationally together, with that sharing of knowledge and optimism, because ultimately all of us are producers, and producers thrive on one thing, which is being optimists. What's gives us the courage to come back and have another go again. You know, if we fall on the horse, it's why we get back on the horse and try again. And I suppose for those of us, you know, for those of you that are watching, I suppose the important thing to also say in this is that to hold on in there, and that to know, hopefully in this hour together, to say that, you know, you're not alone. If you're having a really tough time and you've joined the webinar and you hope to be in Edinburgh, you're not, and you'll only talk to someone, come and speak to people. We're all in it together, whether we're large or small. This pandemic has affected all of us in different ways. And actually the only way as an industry, as we always will do, is to work collaboratively together as one to come out of that. And, you know, thank you so much, all of you, for giving up your time to this afternoon to come and share that. And I hope we found a little bit of hope. I'm certainly going away feeling this evening much more hopeful than I felt an hour ago when I stepped into this conversation. And now I'm missing you all, obviously, with not being in Edinburgh, seeing you all. But, you know, I also know that, you know, there's another year ahead of us next year, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. And that's always the life of putting a Fringe show on. So, yeah, so thank you. Amy, are you still with us as well? Oh, and Alan.
Yeah, I just want to echo what everyone else. I'm now way more hopeful and inspired than I've been.
If you had that cup of tea, go away and have a big drink now, I think, is the normal, and a big toast, you know.
Oh, Amy, you're muted.
Oh, still
I'll unmute her.
As I'll mute. There we go.
Yeah.
No, just saying thank you all. That was a really interesting session, and good to be reminded to be optimistic, and that indeed they are challenging times, but we will get there, and to continue to support each other, and hopefully we will continue to be in touch and communicate and see each other next August, whether it's virtually or in the live or a hybrid of the two. And for anyone listening, there's lots more events coming up over the next couple of weeks, so have a look at the program and register to anything else.
Something else I wanted to do a quick shout out or plug to is something that everyone on your screen at the moment helped contribute to and make happen, and it's something called the Fringe Marketplace. So anyone who out there who's accredited as a programmer and things, Amy's team has created an incredible site called the Marketplace, where you can log in and look for shows and experience them and comment on them to try and fill that void left by there not being a physical festival. And that can be reached at marketplace.edfringe.com. Maybe you can speak more eloquently on that than me, Amy.
I'll put a link in the chat so that you can have a look at it yourself. But yeah, I mean, it was the shows that were meant to be programmed for this year's Fringe that the venues have put forward. And as someone referred earlier, it's not necessarily about picking up touring work, it's about getting to know artists that are making professional work and understanding their work more. And it might be that you reach out to them because you're interested in creating a project with them. It might be that you are actually programming for a venue in 21 or 22, but go on and have a look and then explore and give us your feedback. It's new. As Shona and I keep saying, everything is an experiment. So yeah, go and have a play and enjoy it and support the artists.
Yeah, so ultimately I have the final power over the big red button to close down the meeting. So I just wanted to take the final time just to say thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you for every single panelist. Thank you for Richard for chairing. Seeing so many people from all across the globe has kind of warmed the cockles of my heart a lot today and made me feel more fringe than I have in a while. So thank you to everyone. Okay.
Bye.
Take care. Thank
Ciao,
you.
ciao.
Bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.